We're going to learn the first mimer, page 3. ואכלתם אכול. This mimer, interesting enough, was said in Shablin, which there was a wedding there, big wedding. The famous chasana of Shablin was the wedding between the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. They both married off grandchildren. And it was a very big simcha, and you can imagine when these two great tzaddikim came together. So it was more than just the marriage of the grandchildren, but something very special was happening. And the mimer was said, Parshas Tzav. But the inyan of the mimer is something which, based on that, we can explain, the Alter Rebbe explains a concept that we find in this week's parsha. It says in the parsha that Zeh carbon iron of Anav, Asher Yakrivu LaHashem, B'yemim Mashachesed. So the Torah talks about the carbon that Aaron and his children bring. Now, what is unique about the fact that Aaron and his children are bringing carbonas? So what's unique is that the whole idea of a carbon is to elevate the animal that is being brought on the mizbeach. And there's many different aspects to that. Aaron, so this happens, the elevating the animal happens in two-step process. Number one, it's brought on the mizbeach. And number two, it's eaten by the kohen. So when the kohen eats it, that also brings about this birur, this elevation that takes place. So the question is, from the parsha, that Aaron is bringing a carbon, how is the one that brings about the birur, the one that elevates, how is he now needing to be elevated as a result of bringing a carbon? He himself, he's the one that elevates. So now what is it about the fact that Aaron's bringing a carbon, now he himself is being elevated? So that's the idea that needs explanation in the parsha, and based on what we're going to learn here in the mimer, so that point will become clear. And the Likutei Torah is the point that there are many different levels of birur. You have many levels, and the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about several of them. There is the birur that happens with the carbon when you bring it onto the mizbeach. There's a birur that happens after the carbon's being eaten by the kohen. There's a birur that happens when Aaron himself brings the carbon. And a dogma, as an example of this, is we know that a neshama eats, a neshama, in other words, in a body eats food, and the food that it eats is elevated. So you have several levels of elevation that takes place, and again, the Alter Rebbe will describe it more in detail. But the first level that takes place is when a person eats food. So the food, the daimim, tzemeach and chai, they become part of dama basar kipsari. They become part of the human, the medaber, which is now it's being elevated to the level of medaber, which medaber is a superior over daimim and tzemeach chai. That's one aliyah. Another aliyah that takes place is when a person uses that chayis that he receives from, that became dama basar, uses the chayis, the energy, he uses it to serve Hashem. So now it's being elevated not only to the medaber, but to the neshama, to nefesh alekis, to the godly soul, because he's serving Hashem with this energy. Another aliyah that takes place is the aliyah that will happen when Mashiach comes. So it says that the neshamas of today, of Olam Hazeh, in other words, Olam Hazeh means before the period of Mashiach, are going to be food for the neshamas that come after. In other words, these are new neshamas that will come after Mashiach comes. So that's now the neshamas themselves are going to be elevated even to a higher level. So here we see a inyan that the mevarer, the one who is elevating, which is a neshama, is elevating the food that he eats, it itself is going to be elevated, and this is by the neshamas that will come when Mashiach comes. So these are, and that's the idea of the Suda that will happen. It says Leviyasan and Shar Habar. What's the point of eating? Who cares about food? Mashiach comes, there's going to be Gilui Likus. In the world, there's going to be a revelation of godliness in the world. What is the point of eating? Leviyasan and Shar Habar has to do with the different neshamas that are going to be elevated as a result of the neshamas that come after Mashiach comes. And so there's a difference between these two neshamas. The neshamas before, now, in our time, and the neshamas of Mashiach comes. So that's the nekuda. That's the point of the explanation of Aaron. In other words, what Aaron is bringing a carbon. In other words, this is another birur above and beyond the regular birur. The birur of bringing it on the mizbeach, the birur of the kohen eating the food, the carbon, and a birur of Aaron and the aliyah that Aaron has himself. Okay, that's in a nutshell where we're going here. So let's start. So the Alter Rebbe, in order to open up and go into this Indian, he brings a pasuk in Yoel, and over here the pasuk is talking about right before Mashiach comes, or what the pasuk describes. The psukim before it describe that we're going to do tshuva, and then when we do tshuva, all the negative things are going to go away, disappear, and talks about a lot of negative things that remind us that we need to do tshuva there. And then the pasuk actually gives a bracha. It says Yoel. It's interesting. It's just a fun fact. Yoel was the son of Shmuel Hanavi. So it doesn't describe him. I think it says Putiel, but it says Patiel. But anyway, it says Yoel was the son of Shmuel Hanavi. He was a Navi. He gave this prophecy. So it says Va'achaltem acha b'saveya v'ilautem Hashem Elokecha asher asi mochem lahafli v'loyiveshu ami la'ilam. Okay, simple. V'achaltem acha b'saveya. You'll eat and you'll be satisfied. You'll be satisfied. You'll give praise to Hashem, which did something lahafli, wondrous. And my nation will not be embarrassed anymore. In other words, before, when all the calamities were happening and they were hungry, etc., etc., the Navi describes, so they were in a state of busha, they were in a state of embarrassment. But now that the Eibusher is going to give us all these brachas, so they're not going to be embarrassed anymore. Ubiyalkut, so the Yalkut Shimeni, the Medrash, says on this pasuk, ukishu mevarech as tzadikim koifel es birchasam. So, being that this bracha is to tzadikim, they did tshuva, so the Eibishter is koifel es birchasam. He doubles his bracha. What's the double bracha here? First it says va'achaltem and acha v'saveya. That's the first bracha. And the second bracha is v'leiveshu. You're not going to be embarrassed. So we need to understand also why is that a bracha that you're not going to be embarrassed. It's not a negative. I mean, that you're not going to be being embarrassed is a negative. Not to be embarrassed is to remove the negativity. But why is that a bracha? And it's a second bracha. It's another level of bracha. The first level of bracha is v'achaltem acha v'saveya. You'll be satisfied. Another level of bracha is the idea of not being embarrassed. So to explain this, another diuk from this pasuk, it says v'achaltem acha v'saveya. Literally means you'll eat and be satisfied. But why does it repeat v'achaltem acha? You'll eat the food. Obviously, what are you going to eat if it's not food? So what's the idea of eating? Emphasis v'achaltem, you'll eat and you'll be satisfied. So this ties into what we said before, that food is one level of birur. V'achaltem acha, you'll eat, meaning to say there'll be another birur that happens to that which was already mizbarer. That which already was elevated will now be v'achaltem, will be eaten again. So this is, as we're going to say, this is the neshamas of before the time of Mashiach, that they'll be eaten again. In other words, they'll be elevated again. Va'achaltem acha. And v'lo is not only will they be elevated, but lo is a whole other level that they achieve with these brachas. So hine inyan kavanas achilahu. What's the kavanas achila? What's the idea of the fact that the Eibishter made it that we can't just survive? That in order to survive we need to eat. So what's the idea behind that? That we need to eat in order to receive sustenance. Ki yesh neshamas u'malachim bebchinas ishtalshlus ha'olam hazbiyah. When we look at Nivroim, creations, there are two types of creations. You have the creations which are called neshamas, and creations which are called malachim. In every world of Seder Yishtalshalus, so you have the chitzonius of the world and the pnimius of the world. Meaning to say, you have the aspects of the world which are more yesh, which are more a feeling of its own separate existence, and then you have the pnimius, which that is the level of the world which is completely batal and in tune with the chayis aliki that is there, that is present in that world. That's what makes the differentiation between pnimius and chitzonius. So in every olam, neshamis are the pnimius of that olam, and the malachim are the chitzonius. And one way we see this, al derech mashal, is when you have a king, and you have two different types of ministers or subjects. One is he's so batal to the king, you don't even see on him any type of movement, any type of expression of emotion. He's completely in line in tune with that experience of the king, that he stands motionless. And then you have another expression that one feels the king, and this experience brings him to a state of a lot of emotion. And the difference is, it's also either it's two different types of experiences and two different subjects, or also one who's standing in front of the king, no matter who it is in a state of an absolute bittul, meaning there's no expression whatsoever. As opposed to if he's not mamish in front of the king, but he's taken blown away by the experience of the king, so that can bring about a sense. Or we can see it also, you could say another mashal like we see in davening, the difference between Shemon Esrei and Psukei de Zimra. Psukei de Zimra, when you're not in front of the king, meaning to say that you're at a distance, you're marveling over this amazing, wondrous experience and grasp of the king and all in his glory, but you're not in front of him. You're in a distance. So then it brings about many, many emotions. As opposed to when you're in Shemon Esrei, so you're standing mamish in front of the Melech, so it's silent, emotionless. Okay? So this is all. The neshama, the pnimi is when you're in a state of, when you're like face to face, you're in the presence, you feel you're in the presence. So there, it brings about a state of complete bittul, as opposed to when there's distance, when he's not mamish in experience of being mamish in front of the king, so that brings about different emotions. So nisham in every olam, nishamis, or another mashal we see in Tanya when he talks about the nefesh halikis. So the Alter Rebbe says there's machshava and dibur, right? Machshava is pnimius and dibur is chitzonius. So yesh neshamas umlachim mechanas ishtalshus elam is biyah ulchvei diberasi v'yitzartiv. That's the ishtalshus berasi v'yitzartiv achasisi v'yitzirasiyah. V'yesh malachim debriya. V'yesh malachim deyitzira. V'yesh malachim dasiyah. So in every world you have malachim. What's the idea of we're talking about achila? Achila, eating is the food, the sustenance. V'hine l'maylo, in the higher realms, higher worlds, hamazon shel malachim hu mashnim shechlem kach ve'izruchni. So that the malach receives strength, vitality. The food is a vehicle. That the malach should be able to have a deeper awareness in the Eibishter, and to serve Hashem with all their hearts. Hearts here, obviously, the malach doesn't have a physical heart, but hearts means with the complete sense, the complete awareness, it through and through. It says in the Medrash that Shmi Bekirbe, the Eibusha says Shmi, my name is Bekirbe, is within them is the Malachi Asharis, that they are sustained with the Ziva Shchina. Shnemer Vatem Echayis Kulam. So there's the Chayis, the Hashpah of godliness in the world, in the higher realms, and that's what the Malachim receive, and that's the food, their food, that's their sustenance, meaning to say that it's as a result of that the Malachim are elevated, that they're able to have a deep awareness of the Eibishter, even more than what they have as in their natural state. It's an infusion of more awareness, of more chayis that they have. So for the malachim, this is spiritual food, and for nishamis, or when this shefa goes in seder ishtalshlus, so when it reaches this world, so then that mazin is something gashmi, something physical. ובשתלשלוס המדרגס הידירי בריבס ממוצאים, שהם המלאכים שבכל האילמס, שעובר השפע דרך שם ביניהם. So now the shefa gets distributed in every world, and it passes through the malachim, and that's why malachim are called krovai. Krovai can either mean kroivai, which is those that are close to me, or krovai can mean my insides, my innards, because just like using the same analogy of food, what happens? The food gets, just like when a person eats food, so part of the food the purest part of the food goes into the blood, and the rest of it gets discarded, right? Each part, it gets broken down. So too, this spiritual chayis that is infused, disseminated within hishtalshalus. So now one part, the highest, most spiritual part, is to the malachim, and through them, it almost like a metamorphosis into physical food. Shehem b'chinas krevayim shederach bo meiver hashefa v'amaychel v'ayidei zeh nishava mizeh maychel gashmi. And from there, that's the physical food. Uchamayim razal, and like it says in the Medrash, ein lecha esav milamata shenamazal milamayla shemakabei. Every esav, every blade of grass, every blade, every minuscule amount of everything that exists, food, it comes from a mazel. What is the mazel? What's the mazel? The mazel is a koyach ruchni. So that's a koyach ruchni, that it like we said, there's this metamorphosis, this process goes until it becomes a physical food. And each level is more abstract and more spiritual than the level below it. Like that's what it says. Ugavaya ma'al gavaya. The one level is higher than the other. Shomer, which is the level of Shomer. Ugavaya maleim, and it goes higher and higher. Ad shemagia b'shirish kol hasharashim. So now, where does it all come from? The shirish of all sharashim is b'malachim alyenim depriya. So now we went from Asiya to Yitzira to Bria, and everything in between. And there's Mekabel Koyach V'Oiz Midvar Avayis Barachlis Masigim B'Leikusi. So there it's receiving the Koyach and the Oiz, the strength, from the Dvar Hashem, which is from Malchus. Malchus of Olam HaTzilus is the Dvar Hashem, and that's what's giving Chayis, and then it disseminates further into all the Illumus. And from them is the Meichel Gashmi, the physical food. So the Alter Rebbe gives some broad outlines here. From the Pnei Sher of the Merkava, so we know there's a Merkava that Yecheskel saw, and in the Merkava there is many ministering angels. So in general, you have three. You have the Machol. You have Pnei Sher, Pnei Aryeh, and Pnei Nesher. Pnei Aryeh is the Yamin, is Chesed. Pnei Sher is small, is Gvura, and Pnei Nesher is the middle, is Tiferes. And then you have the Pnei Adam. In each one of this, it's almost like a four-sided cube, right? So you have each one. You have on the right is Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Sher is on the left. Then you have in the middle is Pnei Nesher, and then you have the fourth side is the Pnei Adam. As we said before, that in the world in general, we want to divide it. We say the Neshamis, Malachim is Chitzonis. Neshamis is Pnimis, as we said before. What the difference between Pnimis and Chitzonis is. In this description, so Pnei Adam is the Pnimius of the Malachim, which the way that translates into Adam, into people. So the Pnei Adam of the Merkava is the Nefesh HaBahamis. So the Nefesh HaBahamis is a behema, but it has seichel. So seichel, because it has seichel, so it's the Pnimius. Seichel allows you to have bittul, because the whole idea of seichel is to understand something outside of you, as opposed to midas. Midas is the way it's understood, the way it's grasped within you, the way your experience. Akopanim, that's the Pnei Adam. So that's one Adam. Then you have another Adam in this map, which is the Adam which is on the Merkava. The Merkava, the chariot is the Pnei Adam, which is from the Chayis, which are carrying the Merkava, right? And then you have the Adam, which is ala Kisei, and that's the Nefesh Elikis. Okay. Akopanim. So from the Pnei Shor Shem Merkava Shehem Malachim Shem B'chinas Gvura Nimshach Lamata Nefesh HaBehemis U'Meb'chinas Pnei Nesher Nimshachu Efes U'Kshemizgala L'Mayla Mazin Ruchni V'Hashpa L'Malachim. When there's a Hashpa L'Mayla of this Mazin Ruchni, which we said is from Malchus, which is the Dvar Havaya, which gives koyach and oiz, strength for the malachim, that they have this deeper level of awareness that consumes them. Alter Rebbe says b'chol liban, and that from there is nishtalshel v'yirdas hamadrigs mizgal lamata gamkein birchas hashana v'chol minei tfuasa. The food that we have, the chol minei tfuasa. And what's the point of this whole Yerida? The whole v'amechuvin b'Yerida zeh who k'sheyechel ha'adam sheshar shegamkein misham. When a person eats the food, which also a person comes from Bria, but it's different. By the person, it's coming from Bria, so that's from the pnimius of Bria, like we explained, not the chitzonius like the malachim. K'sheyechel ha'adam sheshar shegamkein misham. Shehem neshiyah shesham is the Bria. Vehem b'chinas pnimius yesem and malachim. When they eat the food, as hein meisifim bekoyach v'seichel. So now, when they eat the food and consume it, so now the person who also comes from Bria, but is from the pnimius of Bria, so now they receive koyach and seichel above, higher than it. How is that? Why? How is it that it receives koyach and chayis, which is higher than the food itself? Because the food itself, we said, comes from malachim. In other words, it goes from each level. So how is it that it has the power and the ability to add koyach and chayis within the food? Within the person, rather? It's because the sheirish of the food really comes, as we know, we've learned many times, from olam atayu, which over there it says, l'fnei malach melech. That's higher than the neshama. And because it comes really higher than the neshama, therefore, but it came down lamata, it fell down lamata into this world, and after, as a result of that, it is able to give chayas to the person. Okay, let's to end not abruptly, but this is the whole idea of food, to elevate. As we said before, there's different levels of elevating. And the pasuk "Va'chaltem Akhal," as we said, is the elevating of the food. The food, what usually is food, is managalus, or is when before Mashiach comes, now gets elevated even higher when Mashiach comes, and that's the process of before Mashiach and after Mashiach, and v'leiveshu amila ilam is even a higher level, where Malchus goes and connects with Keser. And that's the idea of lo yiveshu, because yiveshu means busha, to be embarrassed. Embarrassed means to have bittul. That's where Malchus is. Malchus is on its own. Malchus is bittul. But lo yiveshu amilela means it doesn't have the busha, means Malchus now becomes the mashpia, as opposed to the mekabel. And that is when Malchus is elevated to Keser. And that's the second bracha. Okay.